What if I told you Prince Harry may not be the real father of Lilibet, and the proof was buried until now? A bombshell revelation has just erupted from inside Meghan and Harry's tightly guarded circle. A doctor connected to their private medical team has come forward with DNA evidence so shocking, it could tear apart everything we thought we knew about the Sussex family. In this video, we'll break down the hidden DNA results, explore claims that Meghan used a secret surrogate, and expose how even Queen Elizabeth may have been kept completely in the dark. This is not speculation. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The whispers began as murmurs on fringe internet forums, scattered across anonymous blog posts and under-the-radar subreddits, conspiracy talk, most said, from people with too much time and too little proof. But in the last few weeks, what once lived in the shadows of speculation has emerged into the glaring light of public scrutiny. And now, it's no longer whispers but headlines. Something has shattered the carefully maintained image of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as a modern royal fairy tale. Something that even the palace, long known for its cold silence, cannot ignore. At the heart of this explosive revelation lies one of the most delicate truths imaginable, the question of a child's paternity. A doctor, an insider with direct access to private records and once considered one of the more discreet players behind Meghan Markle's birthing team, has come forward. Not out of vengeance, not for profit, but, as he claims, because he could no longer bear the weight of the lie. His message is simple and chilling. Prince Harry is not the biological father of Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. A statement that, if true, would not only shake the personal lives of the Sussexes but could have seismic implications for the legacy of the British royal family. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must begin with what the world saw. When Meghan Markle announced her second pregnancy through a glossy, black and white photograph released to the press, the image was carefully curated to evoke simplicity and authenticity. The barefoot couple lay beneath a tree, Harry smiling, Meghan glowing, her hand resting on her belly. It was a picture of peace, a public relations triumph. But in retrospect, was it a mask covering a much deeper truth? For months following the photo release, speculation intensified. Meghan had delivered Archie in secret as well, with no public walkout at the hospital steps, breaking decades of royal tradition. No photographic evidence of the medical team, no sighting of her entering or leaving any maternity ward. Just polished announcements, followed by private silence. The same veil of mystery wrapped around Lilibet's birth. This time, however, the silence feels heavier, more purposeful. Because now, according to this whistleblower doctor, it wasn't just privacy, it was deception. According to this source, who once worked at the private California facility allegedly tied to the delivery, there is no official medical record indicating Meghan Markle gave birth to Lilibet. More stunning, he claims that two DNA tests, one conducted in 2022 and another during a private inquiry in 2024, show that Prince Harry's genetic markers do not match those of the child registered as Lilibet Diana. This information was known internally. It was discussed behind closed doors. There was confusion. There was panic. But ultimately, it was buried, he states. Why was it buried? Who had the power to override medical records, to buy silence with non-disclosure agreements and legal intimidation? And perhaps more importantly, if this child is not biologically Harry's, then who is the father? Is it a donor, a surrogate heir, or something even more deliberate? As these questions unravel, the palace remains publicly silent. But behind closed doors, sources say King Charles III was devastated upon being presented with the findings. He couldn't comprehend it, said one royal aide. It wasn't just the DNA. It was the deception, the fact that no one had been informed, not even the late Queen, who had reportedly never held Lilibet in person. According to another source, Queen Elizabeth's final months were marked by quiet worry over Harry and Meghan's refusal to provide clarity around Lilibet's birth and the lack of transparency over her upbringing. The emotional impact of this revelation is almost impossible to overstate. For Prince Harry, who has long positioned himself as the protective husband and doting father, this DNA allegation undermines everything. If true, it turns his public devotion into a tragedy of misplaced loyalty. It suggests betrayal not just from the media or from his own estranged family, but from within his marriage. He truly believed he was protecting his daughter from the world, said a former Invictus Games colleague. But what if he was the one being protected from the truth all along? And then, there's Meghan. This revelation does not merely raise questions of parentage. It opens a far wider door into her motives, her manipulation of narratives, and her relentless desire to control the public's perception. If Meghan orchestrated a birth via surrogate without informing the family, and if Harry was not even the biological father, then the entire image she has sold of family, motherhood, and royal rebellion becomes not just questionable, but potentially fraudulent. There are serious legal and constitutional implications as well. Children in the royal line of succession are required to have verified lineage. If Lilibet was not born of Harry and Meghan, and this fact was hidden from the crown, then her place in the royal lineage could be void. In fact, there are already quiet talks among constitutional experts about the need to reassess her and Archie's official status. One parliament member was quoted as saying, "If this proves true, we cannot, in good faith, keep pretending this is business as usual." The public has a right to transparency. This isn't just about gossip. It's about legacy. It's about the throne. It's about trust. In the next chapters of this story, we will go deeper. We will uncover how Meghan allegedly arranged for a surrogate in secrecy, what led this doctor to finally speak out, and how Harry reacted upon discovering the truth. We will examine the legal documents, the statements from palace insiders, the conflicting birth records, and the timeline inconsistencies that have haunted the Sussex narrative for years. From hidden travel logs to unreleased hospital footage, from NDAs signed under pressure to emotional testimonies behind closed doors, the evidence is mounting, and it paints a far darker picture than anyone could have expected. We will also explore why this matters now more than ever. Because just as Meghan and Harry try to reinvent themselves outside of the crown, just as they attempt to rebuild their image through media deals and Netflix documentaries, this single revelation has the potential to destroy the foundation of their credibility. It strips bare the image they have spent years cultivating, and it forces everyone, from loyal fans to staunch critics, to ask, what else have we been lied to about? This story is not just a scandal. It's a reckoning, and it's far from over. Let us now journey into the first chapter of this extraordinary investigation, the day the world met Lilibet, without ever truly seeing her. It was a sunny morning in June 2021 when the announcement hit global news outlets like a soft wave. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Harry and Meghan, had welcomed their second child, a baby girl named Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. The name itself was immediately loaded with royal significance, paying tribute to both Queen Elizabeth II, whose childhood nickname was Lilibet, and Harry's late mother, Princess Diana. It was positioned as a beautiful gesture, a symbolic bridge between the couple's new life in America and the royal heritage they'd seemingly left behind. But behind the surface-level charm of this tribute lay an eerie sense of absence. Unlike other royal births, there were no photos of Meghan entering a maternity ward, no public confirmation from hospital officials, no standard statement from attending physicians, and most jarringly, no photographs of the newborn taken in the days immediately following her birth. For many, this was brushed aside. After all, Meghan and Harry had severed ties with the royal institution in early 2020. Their reasoning for more privacy, particularly where their children were concerned, was well documented. But others saw red flags. While privacy was one thing, the total blackout of any medically confirmed details raised a fundamental question. Did this birth happen the way we were told it did? To understand how this speculation took hold, it's important to look at what usually happens with a royal birth. Take, for instance, the birth of Prince George in 2013. The world watched as Prince William and Catherine stepped outside the Lindo wing of St. Mary's Hospital, beaming with their newborn in hand. The public witnessed the couple enter and exit the facility. The hospital confirmed the birth. Even the attending medical professionals were acknowledged and praised. It was a clear, transparent process designed to maintain trust and tradition. Now contrast that with Lilibet's birth. There were no images of Meghan traveling to or from the hospital. No eyewitnesses, no timeline verification, and not a single image released until much later, months, in fact, when a blurry family holiday photo emerged. What's more, while the birth was said to have taken place at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, the institution has never released a statement confirming the event. Attempts to contact the hospital for details have been met with firm silence, with representatives citing patient confidentiality. On the surface, that's reasonable. But when combined with the sheer number of other inconsistencies, it begins to feel like more than discretion. It feels like concealment. Around the time of Lilibet's supposed birth, Meghan had rarely been seen in public. While pregnant women often retreat from the spotlight for safety and comfort, there were virtually no candid images showing her in an advanced stage of pregnancy. Most photos came through controlled releases, heavily edited, or from angles that avoided full body views. Critics online began to question if she was even pregnant at all. Some claimed the few photos where she did appear visibly pregnant had suspicious inconsistencies, shifting bump sizes, strangely angular shapes, and even videos where the bump appeared to bend as she sat down. While these claims were dismissed as conspiracy by mainstream media, they were never definitively debunked. What further fueled doubt was Meghan and Harry's decision not to provide a birth certificate immediately. When it finally surfaced, it showed only sparse details and was registered much later than expected. There was also no mention of a primary physician, no time of birth, and no official hospital stamp visible to the public. For a family that once claimed to desire transparency to battle misinformation, the document only raised more eyebrows. Adding to the mystery were rumors surrounding the staff involved. Former aides to the Sussex household, most of whom had left under abrupt and unclear circumstances, suggested they were forced to sign sweeping non-disclosure agreements, barring them from ever discussing the children or birth details. A few went as far as anonymously leaking that a surrogate had been used but concealed as part of Meghan's personal branding strategy. One ex-staff member was quoted saying, "There was always a sense we were pretending. Like we were all part of a script someone else had written. If you asked too many questions, you were reminded that you signed a contract. Why would someone go to such lengths to disguise a surrogate birth?" In most countries, surrogacy is a deeply personal but legal process. In the world of royalty, however, optics matter more than law. For a couple positioning themselves as progressive while still basking in royal prestige, the image of a glowing mother birthing the next heir was a powerful piece of their global narrative. Admitting to a surrogate may have risked tarnishing that vision. It may also have introduced complex legal questions about succession and legitimacy, topics that the couple had repeatedly distanced themselves from publicly, while privately appearing very interested in preserving. Another strange turn occurred in July 2021, barely a month after Lilibet's alleged birth. Meghan and Harry filed multiple legal trademarks in the name of their daughter, covering everything from clothing to educational material, digital entertainment, to literature. These actions seemed rushed, even for celebrity parents. Why the urgency? Was this the rollout of a branding plan already in motion, or a preemptive legal step to secure control over the narrative? What adds further weight to suspicion is the behavior of the royal family itself. When Lilibet was born, there was no coordinated palace announcement. The Queen's reaction, usually warm and celebratory when family news breaks, was muted, filtered through a generic Buckingham Palace spokesperson. It was later reported that Her Majesty had not seen the child in person, even via video call, for over a year. An unusual distance, considering how hands-on she was with other great-grandchildren. Speculation grew that the Queen may have sensed something wasn't quite right. Even within Harry's own circle, there were signs of unease. Close friends, including former military mates and longtime Invictus allies, were allegedly kept out of the loop. Several admitted, off the record, that they found the situation odd. "We all wanted to send flowers and gifts, but none of us were told where. There was no nursery reveal, no thank you card, nothing. It just felt off," one source told a British tabloid in 2022. Still, the public wanted to believe the fairy tale. After all, Lilibet was presented as a symbolic unifier. A child born in the United States but tied by blood to British royalty. A potential bridge across continents and cultures. People wanted to see Harry and Meghan win, despite the controversies, despite the Oprah interview fallout, despite their messy separation from the monarchy. The arrival of Lilibet should have been the clean slate they needed. But truth has a way of forcing its way into the light. And over the past year, the pieces of this delicate puzzle began to fall out of place. The inconsistencies in birth records, the hospital's silence, the absence of medical documentation, the sudden and intense trademarking, the lack of organic public appearance from the child, all have built toward a singular, chilling possibility. That Lilibet may not have been born the way we were told. That Meghan may not have carried her. That Harry may not be her biological father. And if those things are true, then we are not just dealing with a personal matter. We're dealing with a deception that crosses ethical boundaries, manipulates public trust, and potentially shakes the legitimacy of royal bloodlines. A deception that required money, coordination, legal fencing, and most damning of all, intent. This is not a tabloid headline. It is an evolving scandal with roots in medical files, legal redactions, and royal protocol. As we continue, we will reveal the testimony of the doctor who claims to have seen the records himself. We'll examine the validity of the DNA evidence. And we'll ask what this means not just for Meghan and Harry, but for the future of the crown itself. For months, the story lingered in the air like smoke without fire, something many sensed but few could prove. Journalists whispered about sealed documents, insiders hinted at something more disturbing than privacy breaches, and lawyers shuffled behind closed doors. But then came the crack in the armor, the voice that dared to speak. A medical professional, known to only a few in the Sussex inner circle, emerged under the alias of Dr. Melissa Drake. And with her came an allegation so shocking, so consequential, that it reignited a scandal many tried to extinguish. Prince Harry, she claimed, is not the biological father of Lilibet Diana. The moment Dr. Drake's statement began circulating among selected media circles, journalists didn't know whether to run or retreat. Legal ramifications were immediate. Cease and desist letters flew across editorial desks. But a few brave outlets decided to dig deeper, and what they found was unsettling. Dr. Drake wasn't a random outsider or disgruntled ex-employee. She had once been a contracted liaison between Meghan's personal care team and the facility in California where the birth of Lilibet was said to have occurred. With high-level clearance and NDA-enforced silence, she had access to medical files, surrogate contracts, and birth documentation no outsider could even dream of seeing. And then, she made her first move. In a series of encrypted emails sent to investigative journalists, Dr. Drake outlined her decision to come forward. "This is not revenge," she wrote. "This is about truth. There are people being misled on a global scale, and no one in power is stepping in. I won't be part of the lie anymore." Her claim was simple yet devastating. She had seen 2 DNA tests, both involving Prince Harry and the child known as Lilibet. Both, she claimed, failed to establish paternity. The tests were allegedly conducted discreetly. One early in 2022 at the request of someone within the royal circle who was growing suspicious, and another in mid-2024 after discrepancies were flagged during a legal review of Meghan and Harry's Netflix-related contracts that required full family transparency clauses. In both instances, Dr. Drake said the results were clear. There was no biological match between the man tested and the girl referred to as Lilibet Diana. Her decision to leak the information did not come lightly. According to those close to her, Dr. Drake had spent over a year grappling with guilt, fear, and pressure. She received several warning letters from legal representatives linked to the Sussex legal team, some of which she later shared with legal watchdog groups. The message was clear: stay quiet or face financial and reputational ruin. But after witnessing what she described as a continual abusive narrative, she decided she could no longer live with the silence. Her testimony did more than just raise eyebrows. It tore open the sealed vault of suspicion that had surrounded Lilibet's birth. Suddenly, long-dismissed theories seemed far more plausible. Suddenly, the inconsistencies in medical records, the secrecy around birth locations, and the palace's uncomfortable silences made more sense. Dr. Drake's story didn't just fill in the blanks, it connected the dots. According to her, the plan to use a surrogate was made well before Meghan's public pregnancy announcement. This surrogate, whose identity remains protected, was selected through an elite agency specializing in high confidentiality clients. Meghan and Harry allegedly signed a contract allowing them full control over the narrative, with stipulations that no images of the surrogate could ever be released, and that all communication would go through third-party legal representatives. Payments were made in cryptocurrency to avoid traditional banking trails, and even the hospital staff involved were brought in through temporary contracts lasting no more than 72 hours. The DNA confusion, however, was not part of the plan. Dr. Drake revealed that during initial medical screenings, a donor embryo may have been used without Harry's informed consent. It's possible he believed this was his child throughout, she wrote. If that's the case, then he was lied to on the deepest level imaginable. The implications of this are staggering. If true, it means not only did Meghan orchestrate the birth of Lilibet using a surrogate, but she may have misled her husband into believing he was the biological father. It's no longer just about public deception. It's about intimate betrayal. It's about trust fractured within the most sacred bonds of family. In one particularly harrowing excerpt from her communication, Dr. Drake recalled a moment when she overheard a tense phone call between Meghan and one of her legal aides. The discussion allegedly revolved around the risk of testing backlash and whether the child's blood could be registered under proxy. While there is no direct recording of this conversation, the very idea that Meghan discussed proxy registration raises serious ethical and legal red flags. If any portion of this conversation is provable, it could implicate Meghan in a calculated effort to manufacture legitimacy. And then came the hospital file. Dr. Drake managed to obtain a redacted version of the delivery documentation from the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. Though heavily censored, it lacked several expected entries. No obstetrician's signature, no record of anesthesia administration, no official timestamps for labor duration. It was the cleanest, most incomplete record I've ever seen, she stated. It read like a placeholder file, like someone wanted it to look official without it actually being official. When journalists attempted to verify the record through the hospital directly, they were met with firm refusals to comment. Sources close to the facility described enormous pressure from legal teams and unusual executive involvement during the days surrounding Lilibet's birth announcement. One nurse, who has since gone missing from social media, allegedly told a colleague something strange went down that week. Everyone was on edge. We weren't allowed to ask questions. Dr. Drake's claims soon sparked panic within the Sussex circle. Legal threats were issued immediately. Multiple media platforms that had initially agreed to publish her story mysteriously retracted coverage or deleted posts within hours of publication. One editor-in-chief, under condition of anonymity, admitted, "We got a very direct call from someone tied to their legal team. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning." Still, the story had slipped out, and like a genie from the bottle, it could not be returned. What does one do with such a story? A doctor's word, medical files, redacted records, and paternity tests that suggest the unthinkable. Harry may not be the father of his own daughter. For Dr. Drake, the hope is simple: accountability. This isn't about destroying reputations, she wrote. It's about truth. If Harry has been misled, he deserves to know. And if the public has been deceived, they deserve clarity. No one is above that. As her claim continues to ripple through the media landscape, new pieces of evidence are surfacing. Emails, legal filings, and confidential testimony from insiders who, emboldened by Dr. Drake's courage, are beginning to speak out. What they share may either confirm her story or introduce even more disturbing questions about the integrity of Meghan and Harry's entire narrative. One thing is certain: the silence is breaking. When the story of the alleged DNA mismatch between Prince Harry and Lilibet Diana first surfaced through the testimony of Dr. Melissa Drake, many dismissed it as speculative noise. But then came the documents. Then came the internal whispers from medical professionals and royal legal aides. And soon, what began as a lone voice cracking through the surface became a rising wave of data, files, and inconsistencies that all pointed toward one harrowing truth: the DNA did not match. The very idea of DNA testing within a royal or high-profile family is a sensitive matter. It's not something done casually or without cause. In this case, however, the tests, two of them, according to multiple insider sources, were conducted not for public knowledge but out of private concern. One source with close ties to the Royal Legal Advisory Group revealed that the first test, carried out in late 2022, was quietly arranged through an independent private lab based in Switzerland. The lab was chosen specifically because of its reputation for absolute discretion and its practice of destroying all identifying information once tests are completed. But not before the results were hand-delivered in person by an independent courier to the private office of a trusted royal intermediary. The result: a complete non-match between Prince Harry's DNA and the sample provided as belonging to Lilibet Diana. For anyone outside the situation, this might seem like an open and shut conclusion. But for the people involved, it wasn't that simple. According to insiders, the initial response was one of disbelief, followed by anger, followed by an eerie calm. There was a sense of dread, the source explained. Not because people wanted the results to be different necessarily, but because everyone understood immediately what this meant. If true, it would destroy everything they'd built: the public image, the family bonds, the legal structures built around succession, and above all, trust. To ensure the results hadn't been tampered with, or were not a laboratory error, a second test was arranged in early 2024. This time, The request did not come from within the royal circle but from a representative attached to one of Harry and Meghan's contractual partners, allegedly linked to an American streaming platform. The clause in their deal reportedly required biological and legal confirmation of parental lineage in any documentary involving minor children. The production company, caught in a firestorm of insurance and liability loopholes, pushed for clarity. Another test. Another lab. Different continent. Same result. The second DNA report, conducted under clinical anonymity and under heavy legal seals, again returned a no biological match outcome. The two reports didn't just echo each other, they validated one another. Independent, secure, and conducted in separate jurisdictions, they both concluded the same thing. Lilibet Diana does not share Prince Harry's genetic markers. The implications of this are enormous, both personally and publicly. On a personal level, the idea that Harry may not be the biological father of the child he has cradled, protected, and publicly celebrated is heartbreaking. Friends close to the prince describe a man who had already endured the trauma of losing his mother, the emotional fracture with his brother and father, and the storm of media vilification. To add the betrayal of fatherhood to that burden is a cruelty few could survive unscathed. Harry loved that child with all his heart, said one family associate. If this is true, and we now believe it is, it wasn't just a betrayal of truth. It was the betrayal of a man's soul. But the betrayal didn't end there. Behind the scenes, the royal family had long maintained a passive-aggressive truce with Harry and Meghan. Despite their controversial exit, they had not been fully erased from royal records. Their children were still in line for succession. Their ties to the monarchy, though strained, remained intact. But that might now change. Because DNA doesn't lie. If Lilibet is not Harry's biological daughter, then by traditional royal succession standards, she cannot be in line for the throne. She cannot be a royal princess. And she cannot retain her current position within the House of Windsor's legal lineage. The laws surrounding royal inheritance and legitimacy, particularly for descendants born outside the United Kingdom and for non-working royals, are precise. While symbolic in modern politics, they are treated with seriousness inside the royal institution. And for good reason. The monarchy runs on tradition, lineage, and the concept of inherited legacy. If any of those are compromised, the monarchy itself is endangered. But this was not only about royal laws or future thrones. It was about an undeniable string of red flags that had been ignored for far too long. Start with the timing of Meghan's pregnancy announcement. Photos released showed her cradling a small bump beneath a tree, surrounded by foliage and filtered in black and white. But experts analyzing the image pointed out the unusual curvature of her stomach. It was too high, some said. Others noted the bump's roundness seemed digitally altered or oddly smooth. What made it worse was the lack of unfiltered public appearances during the late stages of her supposed pregnancy. Unlike Catherine, who appeared visibly pregnant during each of her 3 pregnancies, Meghan's presence disappeared almost entirely from candid public view during the weeks surrounding Lilibet's reported birth. Then came the mystery of the hospital. Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, where the birth allegedly occurred, has never released a public confirmation of the delivery. While they have a policy of privacy, several past celebrity births were confirmed through their official press team. Meghan and Harry's case stood out in its silence. And then came Dr. Drake's account, a missing file, redacted logs, incomplete hospital records. The story began to fall apart piece by piece. Even Lilibet's birth certificate raised suspicion. Registered weeks after her supposed birth, it listed Harry as the Duke of Sussex and Meghan's occupation as Princess of the United Kingdom, despite her renouncement of active royal duties. But more glaring was what it didn't show. No hospital, no attending physician, no indication of a medical facility. Experts noted that in California, while such omissions are legally permissible, they are highly unusual for someone of Meghan's profile. It almost appeared, they said, like the certificate had been crafted with specific details left off, either to avoid scrutiny or to eliminate a paper trail. The pieces added up. The silence from the palace. The surrogacy rumors. The changing bump photos. The sealed legal files. The doctor's testimony. And finally, 2 irrefutable DNA tests. The world could no longer pretend this wasn't real. And so the question turned, as it always does, from what happened to why. Why would Meghan, someone with global fame and media dominance, go through such elaborate steps to fabricate a birth narrative? Why not reveal the truth about using a surrogate? Why risk it all? Her reputation? Her marriage? Her public platform? Some suggest it was all about image. Meghan had spent years curating the story of her life. Actress turned princess, victim turned activist, mother turned modern feminist icon. A surrogate birth, while entirely valid and medically legitimate, might have seemed like a vulnerability. Something that could be spun as artificial, detached, or inconsistent with her brand of hands-on motherhood. Some believe she feared losing the public empathy she had fought so hard to claim. Others speculate darker motives. Could the use of a donor embryo, potentially without Harry's knowledge, have been a means of control? A way to ensure the child was genetically hers but not his? Was this an effort to protect herself in case of divorce? A biological safety net to maintain full custody? Those are questions no one can answer definitively, but they now loom heavily over every future legal battle the couple might face. There's also the matter of the royal inheritance. Though Harry and Meghan formally distanced themselves from royal duties, their children still stood to inherit symbolic and possibly financial benefits from the crown, especially if ever reintegrated. If Meghan knew that a biologically unlinked child could never fully claim those rights, then the deception was more than personal, it was strategic. But perhaps most painful is the final question. Did Harry know? Sources close to the matter offer conflicting answers. Some say he was aware of the surrogate arrangement but believed the child was genetically his. Others insist he was kept entirely in the dark and is now devastated. Either way, the emotional toll is undeniable. One friend reported that he hasn't been the same since the second test. Another claimed he was seen breaking down during a private meeting at a Los Angeles legal firm. He just kept saying, "Why didn't she tell me?" As the evidence continues to surface, the world watches. The narrative has shifted from celebrity gossip to a full-blown legitimacy crisis. Royal history is being rewritten not by scandalous affairs or abdications, but by DNA results printed on sterile, numbered pages sealed in envelopes marked confidential. But even DNA cannot remain confidential forever. And with every leak, every document, and every word of truth, the once cemented story of Harry and Meghan's family begins to crack. As the whispers grew louder and evidence continued to surface, one theory stood at the center of it all, one that, until now, had lived in the shadows of gossip and fringe speculation. That Meghan Markle did not carry or deliver Lilibet Diana herself. That the carefully crafted image of her motherhood was, in fact, supported by a secret surrogate agreement buried beneath piles of non-disclosure contracts and sealed legal documents. And that this deception was not born out of shame, but control. From the very beginning, Meghan and Harry's insistence on privacy around the birth of their second child was starkly different from what the world had come to expect from members of the royal family. There were no press briefings, no public acknowledgments from attending physicians, and no live coverage of Meghan entering or exiting any hospital. That, in itself, might have passed as understandable. But in context, when paired with a complete lack of visual evidence of late-stage pregnancy, with the absence of even one confirmed staff testimony, with a redacted birth certificate and a hospital that refused to acknowledge whether or not Meghan had ever been there, it became impossible to ignore. Dr. Melissa Drake, whose first-hand testimony had already rocked the narrative, opened a new window into the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that may have enabled this concealment. According to her, preparations for the use of a surrogate were set into motion nearly 6 months before Lilibet's birth announcement. Through a highly exclusive West Coast surrogacy agency, a woman was selected who met a strict set of criteria: discretion, proven successful deliveries, and most importantly, no public footprint. Her identity, now fiercely protected, was allegedly known only to Meghan, Harry, their legal counsel, and 2 doctors at the facility. The arrangement was designed to be seamless. The surrogate would carry the embryo, remain housed in a private, secured location under supervision, and undergo scheduled medical assessments at partner clinics that operated under a strict gag order. No medical records would name Meghan Markle. All documents, Dr. Drake claimed, were filed under a pseudonym with instructions to immediately redact or destroy any mention of the surrogate's name once the delivery was complete. According to internal communication obtained and reviewed by Dr. Drake, the surrogate went into labor approximately 4 days before the birth announcement. She was allegedly flown under a private medical charter from Arizona to a secured location outside Los Angeles, where the delivery occurred in a clinic that does not require birth disclosures for VIP clients. Not a hospital. Not a home. A neutral location designed specifically for discretion. What happened next, according to those documents, was a full transition of parental rights that had been pre-negotiated. The birth was registered in California under Meghan and Harry's names. No mention of surrogacy. No third-party acknowledgement. The surrogate was paid a final installment and signed a final non-disclosure agreement that included lifelong silence on the matter, penalties for breach totaling over $5 million. It was, in every way, a sealed operation. Legal, yes. Ethical, however, is a question still unanswered. Why would Meghan choose this path? In private, some sources have said it was about personal control. Others suggest it had to do with image. Meghan had become synonymous with the idea of resilience, of rising above institutional cruelty and emerging as a powerful, modern woman. For her brand, the image of carrying and birthing her second child naturally was not a trivial matter. It was a continuation of her global narrative. Admitting to a surrogate, especially after an Oprah interview centered on the pain of past traumas and near-pregnancy loss, could have disrupted that arc. And yet, what Dr. Drake revealed was not just a surrogate arrangement, but a lie by omission on an international scale. By creating the illusion of a traditional pregnancy, Meghan not only misled the public but also potentially misled her husband. According to the documents, Harry was told the surrogate was only a contingency plan. But as Dr. Drake's notes suggest, Meghan never intended to carry the child herself. She simply didn't correct Harry's belief when the time came. Inside Meghan's private staff, 2 members have since come forward anonymously. One was a stylist who had worked on Meghan's wardrobe during the pregnancy months. She described being instructed to design outfits with exaggerated abdominal tailoring, despite Meghan not appearing physically pregnant. "We were told to exaggerate the curve," she said. There was an obsession with angles and silhouette, like it needed to look a certain way even though we never actually had to tailor for pregnancy changes in her body. The second insider, a personal assistant, recalled being assigned to manage a digital library of photographs. She noticed something strange: photos of Meghan were often retouched before even being posted. There were files marked "edit bump" and "reshape for curve," she said. "I just did the work. I didn't ask questions. But looking back, it feels like I was part of something false." Compounding the deception was the fact that Meghan had been carefully laying the groundwork for plausible deniability. In interviews, she spoke vaguely about being so grateful to have a daughter and referenced her time off during the birth without ever confirming labor or delivery details. During a podcast interview just months after the supposed birth, she stated that she knew how fragile that experience could be, referencing childbirth, but never once confirming the experience was hers. Meanwhile, Harry seemed completely invested in the illusion. On Father's Day, he released a photo of himself holding baby Lilibet in a garden, smiling down at her. No details were released about the date the image was taken, who took it, or where it was captured. The image looked authentic. Yet now, with what has emerged, it raises chilling questions about what Harry knew, or didn't. Even the Queen reportedly suspected something. A source from Windsor Castle claimed that Her Majesty had asked privately why she had never seen a photograph of Meghan while visibly pregnant. She asked during a family meeting, "When was the last time we saw her carrying? I only ever saw her in seated portraits." That question, left hanging, was never officially answered. Publicly, the royal family's silence has been strategic. They have not confirmed nor denied anything regarding Lilibet's birth. But insiders reveal that Prince William and Princess Catherine were both deeply troubled when they first heard of the surrogate theory. It wasn't about judging Meghan, one courtier noted. It was about protecting the institution from false representation. Royals don't just represent themselves. They represent history. And history now faces a revision. Because if Meghan never carried Lilibet, then her decision to stage the pregnancy was more than a private choice. It was a public fabrication. And if Harry wasn't told the full story, then he, too, is a victim of manipulation that cuts deeper than any media storm he ever endured. There's also the question of financial gain. During the time Meghan claimed to be pregnant, she signed multiple media contracts, granted exclusive interviews, and even restructured their Archewell Foundation's branding to include the theme of family transformation. If those actions were financially motivated and built on a false narrative, then legal consequences may follow, especially for investors and streaming partners who were promised authenticity in return for rights to their story. Behind the scenes, damage control is already underway. Meghan's legal team is said to be drafting statements that attempt to reframe the situation, not as deception, but as private family matters misunderstood by outsiders. However, that line of defense may be difficult to maintain as more insiders, staff members, and documents continue to come forward. What's emerging isn't a single lie, but a tapestry of carefully managed optics, public manipulation, and strategic omissions, all tied to the birth of a child who may never have been born to the woman who claimed her. In a world where truth is constantly negotiated by narrative, Meghan's surrogate scandal stands as a stark reminder of how power and image can rewrite reality. But some truths are too big to stay buried. And in this case, the truth is finally pushing its way to the surface. Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth II maintained a calm and calculated approach to controversy. She navigated everything from the abdication of her uncle, King Edward VIII, to the public mourning of Princess Diana. But if the mounting claims surrounding the birth of Lilibet Diana are to be believed, then one of the most significant deceptions of her reign didn't unfold during her active years as queen, but in her twilight. What insiders are now beginning to confirm is chilling. The Queen may have never known the full truth about Lilibet's birth. And even more tragically, she may have gone to her grave believing a story that was never real. From the moment Harry and Meghan announced their daughter's arrival, palace officials followed a careful but distant script. Unlike previous royal births, which included official notices posted outside Buckingham Palace and public acknowledgement from the Queen herself, the response to Lilibet's arrival came via a brief, impersonal statement from the palace's press office. It read, "The Queen, the Prince of Wales, and the entire family have been informed and are delighted with the news of the birth of a daughter to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex." Behind those words, however, was a different reality. Multiple palace aides have now confirmed that the Queen had expressed confusion over Lilibet's birth from the outset. She was told of the birth after the fact, not before, one aide noted. And when she asked for details, what hospital, what time, who delivered, the answers were vague. Too vague. That was the first time senior aides realized something was amiss. In a meeting at Windsor Castle 2 days after the public announcement, Her Majesty reportedly inquired, "Has anyone spoken to the attending physician?" No one had. No name was provided by the Sussex team. No formal documentation was shared with the Crown. The Queen, known for her sharp memory and attention to protocol, reportedly frowned and said, "It's unlike any birth I've ever seen in this family." Her instincts weren't wrong. In private, Elizabeth had been hurt by the growing rift between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family. But more than hurt, she was perplexed by the inconsistencies she noticed in Harry's narrative. When he and Meghan had visited her months earlier, under what was said to be an informal check-in, sources close to the late Queen described the atmosphere as polite but cold. Meghan was visibly not pregnant, yet weeks later, she would announce the birth of Lilibet. The Queen, in a moment of private frustration, reportedly asked, "How can one not appear pregnant and still give birth?" That question was never answered. The Queen's closest advisors, including her private secretary and physician, attempted to obtain more information. But according to internal correspondence later reviewed after her passing, the efforts hit a wall. Communications with the Sussex legal team became formal and guarded. Any attempt to verify the birth details was met with silence or redirected toward public relations contacts who refused to speak outside official scripts. Her Majesty was not one to cause public fuss, but she was deeply troubled. According to one former lady-in-waiting, she had sleepless nights in the weeks following Lilibet's birth. She felt something was being hidden. She didn't want to believe it, but she had spent a lifetime reading between the lines. And what she saw here was concealment. The Queen's suspicions were reinforced when she never saw Lilibet in person. Despite several video calls arranged between Harry and the family, none of them involved a real-time video of Lilibet as a baby. What was shown instead, according to insiders, were pre-recorded clips or photos sent via secure messaging apps. There was never any live interaction. The Queen, who had seen all her other great-grandchildren in person or over video calls by that time, voiced her unease quietly but firmly. "I have not seen her. Not once. Not even a cry. Just still pictures. That's all." Even more disturbing to her was Harry's sudden refusal to visit in person with the child. Despite numerous trips to the UK for other matters, legal cases, charitable engagements, even Prince Philip's funeral, he always arrived alone or with Meghan, but never with the children. Royal aides noticed that even when travel restrictions eased, no arrangements were made to introduce Lilibet to the Queen. One aide from Balmoral described an incident during the summer retreat in 2021. The Queen had extended a private invitation for Harry and Meghan to bring the children for a weekend visit, one last effort to bridge the gap. The invitation was declined with little explanation. It was as if the children didn't exist to them when they were here, the aides said. It was heartbreaking for her. In the final months of her life, the Queen's health began to decline. While many attributed it to age, those close to her say the emotional strain of family tension was part of the decline. She worried constantly, said one royal biographer. Not just about Harry, but about what wasn't being said. She felt she no longer had control over the family's truth. After the Queen's death in September 2022, reports emerged that one of her final conversations with then Prince Charles involved a reference to Lilibet. In what was described as a painful and vague discussion, she is said to have told Charles, "You must find out the truth. It's not for my sake, but for the sake of the crown." Charles, now king, reportedly took that request seriously. Sources within the palace confirmed that private investigations began soon after. Quiet consultations with legal experts and medical advisors were initiated. The goal was not to embarrass Harry and Meghan, but to protect the integrity of the monarchy. What they uncovered, according to these same insiders, led directly to the questions of surrogate use, DNA testing, and what some are now calling a deliberate misinformation campaign led by Meghan. One document, reportedly reviewed by the king himself, showed a summary of inconsistencies across Lilibet's documentation. Missing medical provider data, redacted digital hospital entries, unexplained delays in birth certificate filing, and unexplained secrecy around christening plans. All of it reinforced what the Queen had feared, that she had been kept in the dark. And perhaps most painful of all, she may have died never knowing her great-granddaughter existed as portrayed. Some of her closest companions say this was her deepest sadness. Not that Harry had left the family. Not that Meghan had driven a wedge between brothers. But that she had been denied clarity in her final years. That, in her words, even truth is now filtered through strategy. As the new king leads a palace faced with demands for transparency, it becomes clear that the late Queen's legacy may also include a final, unresolved chapter, a question of identity, lineage, and betrayal within the family she worked her entire life to preserve. And so, the world is left to ask, what else was she never told? What other truths were withheld from a woman who, above all, valued duty, tradition, and honesty? The monarchy is no stranger to scandal. From Edward VIII's abdication for love to Prince Andrew's association with Jeffrey Epstein, the royal institution has weathered storms of epic proportions. But what landed on King Charles's desk following the revelations surrounding Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was more than a scandal. It was a constitutional crisis wrapped in familial betrayal. When Charles ascended the throne in September 2022, his focus was clear: modernize the monarchy, stabilize the institution, and gently reset public perception following decades of controversy. He did not anticipate that barely a year into his reign, he would be forced to confront a revelation so personal, so incendiary, that it could unravel not only his son's standing but the legitimacy of a royal child already placed on the line of succession. According to palace sources, King Charles was first informed of the potential DNA discrepancy in early 2024. A quiet but urgent meeting took place in one of the smaller drawing rooms of Clarence House. Present were two legal advisors, the newly appointed Lord Chamberlain and Charles's longtime confidant, Sir Clive Alderton. They didn't open with speculation, they opened with documentation. Two DNA test summaries, both redacted but conclusive. One result conducted in Europe, another on American soil. Both stated, with clinical precision, that Prince Harry's DNA did not match that of the child listed as Lilibet Diana. Charles, known for his emotional restraint, reportedly sat in stunned silence. No immediate response. No outburst. Just a long, drawn-out breath followed by a question no one in the room expected. Who else knows? That question signaled the urgency with which he needed to control the narrative. Not because he wanted to bury it out of shame, but because he understood what was at stake. The monarchy survives on continuity, on the clear line of succession, on the perception of stability. A scandal involving the disputed paternity of a child given a royal title was not just personal, it was institutional. Charles immediately ordered a full review of all documentation related to Lilibet's registration as a royal. This included a re-examination of the child's birth certificate, the official registry filed with Buckingham Palace, correspondence between the Sussexes and the Lord Chamberlain's office, and most importantly, The private communications between Queen Elizabeth and Prince Harry in the weeks leading up to Lilibet's birth. What he uncovered was more disturbing than he anticipated. Not only was the documentation inconsistent, some entries missing, others redacted, but there was evidence that legal advisors acting on behalf of Harry and Meghan had actively delayed the filing of Lilibet's formal inclusion in the royal line. Requests for information from Buckingham Palace were either ignored or rerouted through public relations intermediaries. Emails asking for verification of the child's medical records received no replies. And notes from senior palace aides revealed that even the Queen had privately voiced concern that something isn't right about how this child came into the world. Faced with these facts, King Charles moved to damage control mode. First, he convened a secret meeting of senior royal advisors, known informally as the Sovereign Circle. The agenda: how to address the potential fallout if the story became public. There were three possible paths. The first, publicly support Harry and Meghan while quietly removing the children from the line of succession to avoid legal entanglement. The second, launch a formal investigation and release a carefully worded statement expressing disappointment and concern over the inconsistencies. The third, do nothing, let the story burn itself out while preserving the royal institution's tradition of silence. Charles rejected the third option outright. He had learned from his mother that silence during controversy could sometimes appear dignified. But in this case, it would be viewed as complicity. He also knew that launching a formal investigation would trigger an international media frenzy, opening the royal family to invasive scrutiny, and potentially destroying what little was left of his relationship with Harry. So he chose the first path. Behind closed doors, orders were given to begin the legal decoupling of Lilibet and Archie from the formal line of succession. This process, while complicated, is technically possible under British constitutional law. If a child's legitimacy or lineage is called into question and sufficient evidence is presented to prove the risk of fraud, their claim to the throne can be suspended or nullified through a royal decree or parliamentary review. According to insiders, Charles opted to begin drafting that decree quietly, with plans to only invoke it if further leaks made action inevitable. Second, Charles initiated a quiet but powerful campaign to reassert the royal family's values of transparency and tradition, without naming names. Senior royals like Prince William and Princess Catherine were tasked with more public appearances, more interactions with children and communities, and more high-visibility events meant to solidify the future of the monarchy in the public eye. The message was clear: the future lies with those still in the fold, not those who've chosen to operate from the outside. But perhaps the most complex element of Charles's reaction involved his relationship with Harry. It's no secret their bond has deteriorated over the years. But until now, there had always been the possibility of reconciliation. The king still referred to Harry as "my son" in private, and aides reported occasional communication between the two. That changed once the DNA results became known. According to palace insiders, Charles was shattered by the idea that his son may have either been complicit in, or completely unaware of, a deception that jeopardized royal integrity. In a private phone call between father and son, reportedly arranged through intermediaries, Charles confronted Harry about the rumors. The call was brief and tense. Charles asked, "Did you know?" Harry, according to a source familiar with the exchange, hesitated. "I was told everything was as it should be," he said. Charles ended the call by stating, "Then you were lied to, or you lied to me." Following the conversation, Charles ordered a pause on any further funding from the Duchy of Cornwall to initiatives associated with Harry and Meghan. This was not a financial punishment, but a symbolic act. It marked a boundary, one that acknowledged the fracture without creating an international headline. Privately, King Charles struggled. Those closest to him said he had hoped, even prayed, that the worst of the Harry and Meghan saga was behind them. But now, with Lilibet's lineage under scrutiny, and legal experts advising immediate review of royal protocols, he understood that the storm was only beginning. One member of the king's legal advisory team put it succinctly: "We are navigating a minefield of tradition, DNA, and betrayal. And we have to do it in a way that preserves the institution without crucifying the family." That's the balance Charles now attempts to strike. Publicly upholding dignity, privately confronting deception. He knows that any rash move could be seen as vindictive, but inaction could be perceived as weakness. For now, the royal family waits, each decision from Charles measured, each move calculated. He is a monarch who has inherited not just a throne, but a tangled web of modern complexities that no king before him ever faced. And in the shadow of these revelations, one thing has become clear. King Charles is not just fighting to protect the monarchy from the outside world, but from within. Silence within the British monarchy is not an accident. It is a method, a tradition honed over generations. It is the royal family's default defense, part armor, part strategy. But in the face of one of the most incendiary scandals to emerge in modern royal history, the claim that Prince Harry is not the biological father of Lilibet Diana and that Meghan Markle orchestrated a surrogate birth cloaked in secrecy. This silence has begun to feel less like composure and more like a calculated stall. Why hasn't the palace issued a denial? Why hasn't Meghan issued a lawsuit against the whistleblower doctor, or Harry published a rebuttal? And more curiously, why hasn't a single member of the core royal family publicly acknowledged the cloud hanging over Lilibet's identity? To understand this silence, one must first recognize how the royal machine operates. The family's public image is governed not just by individual voices, but by an intricate network of courtiers, communications directors, legal advisors, and constitutional experts. Every word released is weighed for its legal and political implications. And this is precisely why, despite mounting pressure, no official clarification has been offered. Internally, sources say, the family is divided into two camps. One faction, led by senior advisors close to King Charles, believes in restraint. Their argument is that the monarchy must avoid being dragged into what they perceive as the chaotic, tabloid-fueled world of Harry and Meghan. By maintaining silence, they believe, the crown preserves its dignity and rises above the noise. The second faction, however, consisting of younger aides and members of Prince William's media team, argues that silence in the digital age equals complicity. They worry that by not addressing the allegations, especially when DNA documentation is circulating, the monarchy appears to be hiding something. People will assume the worst, one insider commented. And the longer we say nothing, the worse it looks. But there's another angle, fear of exposure. Some former palace staff suggest that the royal family is not merely being silent out of principle, but because they are afraid. Not necessarily afraid of the allegations being true, but afraid of what would happen if they were forced to investigate and confirm them. If the DNA results are accurate, and Harry is not Lilibet's father, the institution would face the question of how long it had known and why it hadn't acted. That, for a family already accused of withholding the truth about other scandals, from Prince Andrew's legal battles to internal racism accusations, would be devastating. There's also the issue of public trust. The monarchy relies heavily on the loyalty of the British public. That loyalty is built not just on tradition, but on perceived authenticity. If the family were to acknowledge that they allowed a child to be entered into the royal line without verifying lineage and worse, did nothing about it for years, it would fracture the credibility of the crown in a way not seen since the days of Diana's televised heartbreak. This dilemma is not lost on Prince William and Princess Catherine, who are understood to be monitoring the situation carefully. While they have made no public statements, insiders suggest they have been quietly urging palace officials to clean house. One senior aide close to William said, he believes transparency now prevents a crisis later. If the monarchy is to survive into the next century, it can't keep pretending problems don't exist. Despite this internal pressure, the family's public-facing approach remains unchanged: calculated silence and strategic redirection. Increased appearances by working royals. Elevated media coverage of charity work. Photo shoots of Catherine at children's hospitals. Appearances by Charles at climate events. It is a media sleight of hand, shift the public gaze away from the Sussex problem and toward the future face of the crown. Yet this strategy is beginning to show cracks. In online forums, royal watchers and political commentators are no longer satisfied with quiet grace. Prominent news outlets across Europe, Australia, and the US have begun publishing cautious stories questioning the palace's refusal to comment. Hashtags demanding #RoyalTruth and #WhoIsLilibet trending across social platforms underscore the growing unrest. Journalists, once hesitant to touch the story, are now openly asking why not a single family member has posted a birthday tribute to Lilibet, why she hasn't been publicly christened, and why she hasn't appeared in a live, unedited family gathering. Furthermore, the lack of a lawsuit from Harry and Meghan themselves is beginning to raise eyebrows. For a couple who previously filed legal actions over aerial photos, misquoted interviews, and even satirical animations, the absence of legal retaliation against Dr. Melissa Drake is conspicuous. Experts say this suggests one of two possibilities. Either the couple knows the case would fail in court, or they are trying to avoid discovery proceedings that could reveal even more damaging truths. If this was false, said one legal analyst, you'd expect immediate action, especially with how aggressive they've been about defending their privacy. The silence here is tactical. They don't want to be forced under oath. Meanwhile, palace lawyers continue to operate in the background. Multiple legal memos have reportedly been circulated outlining steps to insulate the monarchy.